We are continuing in Proverbs 28:19. We start with a little economic advice. He who works his land will have abundant food, but the one who chases fantasies will have his fill of poverty. There are ways to make money which are almost guaranteed. So when my child is heading off to college or not heading off to college, and we say, what do you wish to do? And they say X and X and X, and we say, well, it is fine for you to pursue those, but first, why don't you get a job so that you have money and a livelihood, and maybe you can pursue those as a hobby, and if they come to fruition, that's good. But let's start with something which will give you a foundation of money so that you can actually have food on the table. So the person who goes off to Hollywood to be an actress, what are they spending most of their time doing? That's right, being a waiter. Or as the old joke says, why can't the history major find a job in New York? The answer is because all the taxi driver gigs are taken up by liberal arts majors. It is good to have dreams, but what this proverb is saying is that you need to lay a foundation of reality if you want to keep your mouth, if you want to keep fed, if you want to keep yourself in clothing. If you're pursuing your dreams without starting out by planting your crops, you're going to starve. So, plant your crops first. It's hard, it's boring. The people who say, follow, you must follow you. This isn't fun. This isn't following, and maybe eventually you'll be able to follow you. But you have to start with hard work. God says that we're going to receive our food by the sweat of our brows. Okay? That's hard work. When you do plant that foundation, when you've got the field planted, then maybe you can pursue some dreams. But if you start out by pursuing the dreams, you'll never get the crops planted and you'll starve. Let's move on to 20. A faithful man will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished. Faithful to God. God gives you a vocation. You follow your vocation, you are blessed. But a person who puts riches, mammon, ahead of God and pursues that ahead of the plans and the designs that God has for his life is going to be punished, ultimately and perhaps even now. Okay? So follow in your vocation faithfully. God gives different vocations to different people, but don't put the pursuit of wealth ahead of God, because the pursuit of wealth ultimately disappears. Going to 21. To show partiality is not good, yet a man will do wrong for a piece of bread. Partiality. So instead of judging people by the content of their character, you judge them by the color of their skin. That would be partiality. That's not good. Anyone who was a racist at the time of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., not good. Anyone who is a racist now, saying that white people are not good because they have an inherent, privilege, they're showing partiality to those who are not white. Before, maybe there was a partiality to be showing to those who are white. In both cases, this is not good. Don't show partiality. We look to the actuality. What is this person's character? How are they treating in love or not in love one another? Okay, so that's the first half. The other half says, yet a man will do wrong for a piece of bread. In a desperate time, when you're hungry, you will do desperate things. It's a horrid thing when murder is committed just so you could have a bite to eat. Okay? We know that showing partiality is wrong, but if a man is desperate, if you've stripped them of everything, then they will do desperate and evil things just to get the smallest minimal thing. And it doesn't matter, how wonderful or great they are when they get that desperate. Now, a Christian should turn to God and trust in Him in those situations. But here Solomon is speaking, he's speaking to human nature. You back someone into a corner, and they're very likely to do something evil to rescue themselves from being in the corner. And so when you start showing partiality, and that kind of backs people into a corner, into desperation. In the case of the early church, they were feeding the Hebrew women and not feeding the Greek women. Well, the Greek women were being driven toward desperation. Now, fortunately, the early church resolved that, I don't think with violence. They resolved that by getting some Greek deacons to hand out the food, to watch over the food, to make sure that it was distributed without partiality. But when you start doing that, sin occurs. When you start putting one group in a position of specialness, then the group that you've left out of desperation, they will act, in a sinful way, even for the smallest thing. Moving on, verse 21. No, I'm wrong again. Verse 22. A stingy man is eager to get rich and is unaware that poverty awaits him. First of all, poverty of soul. A stingy man trying to pinch all his pennies. He's put money ahead of caring for others. He's put money ahead of the enjoyment of life that God desires for him. And finally, because he's focused everything upon money and not focusing on God and other people and on the life he has, he's going to have an eternal poverty. But it's also likely that when you're stingy, people just don't like you. And often you can not take advantage of good investments if you're too stingy. If you're not willing to take some risk, Solomon would say they don't take great risk. You're not willing to get any reward either. Okay? So the stingy man, it's not a good lifestyle. It leads you to focus on self rather than others, and it doesn't produce the results that you would like to have anyway. Moving on, final verse 23. He who rebukes a man will in the end gain more favor than he who has a flattering tongue. Honest criticism will be respected. Dishonest flattery, there you go, it is what it is. Well, that person doesn't know anything. Because in honest criticism, you leave a person away from foolishness and death toward life. Dishonest flattery leaves them in foolishness and death. And that's where they end up. So obviously, if they end up having, bad things happen, they're probably not going to like the fact that you let those happen. Let's stop there. Have a good day and have a Happy New Year.